So all to say, I'm not a proponent just saying, well, you got to support Israel, and if they do something wrong, just cover your eyes, just pretend it didn't happen. Some people might. I'm not advocating that, but let's ask the question as to whether this episode's not really going to be a kid-friendly episode. So I'm not going to be, cussing but there's going to be pockets of detail that are shared where you may not want your kid to hear. But just to say, I really feel strongly to do this coverage on the Israel warfare. And so there's so many misunderstandings, and I've heard so many ideas and opinions shouted out that are just wrong, that are misunderstandings, that are foolish, emotional arguments. And so the reason this came up was just that I saw all of that. People that I once respected, people that should know better, people that should be able to weigh the data and balance of research instead of just swinging around and giving someone's opinion that went in their ear and then giving it through their mouth as though they came up with the idea themselves, instead of weighing the data, instead of understanding. Because first of all, I'm not somebody that is simply a supporter of Israel because Abraham was an Israeli. I'm not one who believes that Israel should be supported irrelevant of consequences, irrelevant of what's going on there. No, I'm not one who supports one person besides Jesus Christ. I'm not one to support them groundlessly. I don't blindly follow. I want to see and support what is right, what is true, what is good. And so that's what I want to unpack here, because many that I have once respected, I've seen them purport news and data and opinions based on simply observations on things they didn't understand. You see, a scripture that's always been near and dear to my heart, I've always enjoyed this one. It's Proverbs 18:13, and it says, "It is to a man's folly and shame to answer a matter before he hears it." Now, I think many of us can readily agree with that. Okay, don't answer a question when you haven't even heard the question. That makes sense. But let's look elsewhere where that word "hear" is used in the Hebrew. So again, Proverbs 18:13. Well, when Solomon was a young man and he was in his sleep, God came to him in a dream, and God says to him what many of us could tell. He said, "What would you have me do for you?" And Solomon's response was, "I would have you give me wisdom to rule your people well, and a heart of understanding." That word understanding is the same word used in Proverbs 18:13 to say hear. So if we use understanding in the same light, that means it is to your folly and shame to weigh in on a matter or give voice or air out your opinions as though everyone wants to smell them, to weigh in on a matter when you don't understand the matter. It doesn't say it's just not really good to do. It says it is to your folly and shame to do that. And so that has been something I take to heart. I enjoy that scripture. I don't want to be made a fool because I'm doing that. It's avoid this. So when I saw that, I felt a driving need to weigh in on this matter, to at least clarify what I could. I can't get to the inner depths of what's happening. I couldn't tell you what's happening in the inner chambers of the Israeli government. I can't weigh in on that. That's not my place, and that would be to my folly and shame to try to advocate as though I know, as though I could say what happens there. But using the data that is out there, using the data that you can research if you're not just listening to one channel of media that gives you your opinions on the matter, then this data is out there. So what happened? What happened? So this started 2 years ago. We're almost on the anniversary, October 7th, 2 years ago. So what happened on October 7th? Well, a group of Hamas came in, they infiltrated Israel, and they slaughtered more than 1,500 people, and then they captured more than 250 of them. They captured them, they raped, they burned babies alive in front of their families to make them watch, so they tortured, and they committed these acts of atrocity. Well, this was an act of war. This was an act of war conjured up in their dark hearts, their bloodlust, their war mongering. So this happened because they wanted destruction of Jews. They wanted to bring a pain point there. And so now that group has camped out and used human shields to hide and protect themselves to continue to carry out this agenda that they have. So what is the answer for this? What is the answer for this? Many have advocated that there be a dual state solution, that they be given a portion of land that can be theirs, that they be given a part of Israel so that they can live. Well, do you know that's been offered to them multiple times? Multiple times it's been offered to them, and not once have they considered it. Not once have they taken it and said, you know what, that's a deal. Give us their land. So no, what is their agenda? Would I even want a dual state nation? Would I even want that? Because if I'm thinking of this, think of who we're offering this to. Now, I'm not saying all of Palestine, but the Hamas especially, inside of Gaza. The Hamas have vowed to the very last man's very last breath. They have vowed to perpetuate those war crimes that happened on October 7th. They would perpetuate it to their last breath. Their desire is the raising of that nation, and then ideally so that they can squat on that graveyard and build their nation on top of it. So no, I wouldn't be comfortable being adjacent to them and subject to their animosity. This isn't just tension between peoples. This is a hatred, a desire for their destruction. This is a hatred. So I wouldn't even desire that, yet it's been offered. It's been offered, but they haven't accepted it. And so would you be comfortable if you knew that somebody that was a mass murderer, they had no change of heart, they were still a mass murderer? Would you feel comfortable if they were living next door to you? I wouldn't. I wouldn't. But would you feel comfortable if maybe they were just a little bit further down the street? I wouldn't. I wouldn't. But it's been offered to them. They wouldn't have it. And so all this to say, I'm not a proponent for Israel simply for Israel's sake. I do believe there is still a blessing in the everlasting covenant that God cut with Abraham, where he said, I will bless the people that bless you, and I will curse the people that curse you. I believe there's still a blessing on the nation of Israel because of that covenant, which God did not put aside when Jesus Christ came and then had a sheep from another fold, speaking of the Gentiles. That covenant wasn't put away. The Jews are still God's people. I just got tethered into it by Jesus. Hallelujah. So all to say, I'm not a proponent just saying, well, you got to support Israel, and if they do something wrong, just cover your eyes, just pretend it didn't happen. I'm not advocating that. Some people might. I'm not advocating that. But let's ask the question as to whether they are in the right or the wrong, whether what they're doing is acceptable or whether what they're doing is an abominable, inhumane act. Are they simply blowing and going and raising the ground? They go and everybody in their wake gets burned and destroyed, innocent or guilty. Are they doing that? No. The head of urban warfare studies, Colonel John Spencer, he's perhaps the world's greatest expert in this type of warfare. And he said Israel is applying more measures to minimize civilian casualties than any military in history. That means they are fighting harder than any other military that ever has been recorded, at least, any other military known. They are working harder and more strategically to preserve human life in this warfare. But the Hamas will not lay down their arms. And so let's put this into an understanding for us as Americans, for those who are American watching. So what if on October 7th, 2 years ago, we had an invading army and they slaughtered 40,000 people and they tortured, raped, burned, and captured, imprisoned 10,000 Americans. And then they just set up camp. Now here we are about 2 years later, and they have still been squatting in, let's say, New York. It's arbitrary as to where, we would say it is, but they're holed up in like New York. And now we are doing everything we can, knocking on their doors. We're putting news media, we're dropping pamphlets and flyers to blow through the city and the state, and we're just saying, everyone, get out. Everyone, all civilians, innocent, everyone, get out. And Hamas, lay down your arms, give up, because we are coming and you are not going to be able to withstand us. We're coming for you. And if you don't lay down your arms, you are going down. So let's put that into an American understanding. So now 2 years later, we have not acted very swiftly, but we are still strategically trying to preserve all life that we can. But in that time that they have set up their camp, they have used human shields. Now they're camping out in hospitals. They're camping out in elementary schools. They're camping out and they are using human shields in these places to hold up and protect themselves to further their agenda. Because that is exactly what Hamas is doing. That is exactly what they have done historically. Historically, we have a pattern of the IDF that has knocked on the door of their enemy before they came in and rained down hell upon them. They have knocked on their door and said, hey, we're coming. Get out, lay down your arms, give up what you're doing, or you are going to be destroyed. That is a historical precedent that I have known of for years. They have done that. Now, I don't even know of anybody else that I've heard of, any other army that has done that. No, the norm is that you sneak in unannounced and unseen. You sneak in and you take them out as quickly as possible, trying not to have any crossfire or damage done to any innocent life. But you go in and you do it as quickly as possible and safely as possible, and you don't let the enemy know beforehand. That's common practice, and that's understandable, I think. But at the same time, the IDF hasn't done things that way. They let the enemy know, I'm coming, lay down your arms, get to a safe place, quit doing the evil that you've been doing because we're coming and you can't stand against us. So that's the historical norm for the IDF. Well, what's the historical norm for Hamas? Well, they sometimes at gunpoint will keep innocent lives. They will keep these human shields alive. Sometimes when there's been aircraft firing down on a building where they know terrorists are residing, where they have arms, where they have everything that they had stored up in that building. And as they're going to fire upon the building, again, after they've let everybody know they're coming, there's even videos of innocent people being forced up onto the roof to show the soldiers that are having to fire down upon this building, these innocent people who now they're having to fire down upon. It's sick, it's twisted. But this is the people. These are the people that they are up against. These are the people that have committed this act of war 2 years ago and are now camping in the Gaza city. And so now, as Israel is coming with full warning, like no way that anybody could not know that they are coming to rain down judgment on this terrorist organization. There's not a possibility that innocent lives didn't know about it unless they were being held captive and used as human shields. And so all of this talk about the word genocide is foolishness. Again, to quote that general, Israel is applying more measures to minimize civilian casualties than any military in history. So the word genocide is foolishness. And to purport it, to grab a screenshot and post it on your social media as though you know, and we can't keep ignoring this. We can't turn our eyes away from this. We have to be in support of this. We have to look at this war. Israel, you've got to stop. That is foolishness. That is foolishness. I saw one person that I respected. Again, I respected in my childhood. I respected growing up, and I saw him post on social media saying, well, the numbers don't lie. How many schools have been bombed by Israel's enemy? 0. How many schools have been bombed by Israel now? 200 plus. I think that's the wrong question, because if you ask as a precursor to that, how many schools have been infiltrated and been captured by Israel? 0. How many schools have been captured and used as human shields and tortured and shot by Hamas? Every single one that was bombed. Human shields. So this, what we're seeing, it is tragic. It is awful. But it is crossfire of an enemy that is heinous, that is horrific in their warfare. Very strategic, but horrific and heartless. 90% of Palestinians celebrated and supported the October 7 warfare, the terrorism. They supported it. I mean, on rooftops, not just saying, if I had to choose one or the other, then I'd lean this way. But they were on their rooftops shouting, dancing, partying, ripping candy, throwing candy out into the streets for all to just celebrate. They rejoiced and relished that warfare and terrorism in Israel that happened 2 years ago. But that their enemy is not even just Israel. The same party says death to America, death to America. The same party actually did the same celebration when 9/11 happened over here. They threw a party. They were on their rooftop shouting, dancing, praising death to America. This is not just an Israeli enemy. And now the Americans that they wish death upon, those same Americans are hearing that Israel's the enemy and they're saying, I'm in support of Palestine. It's foolishness. So quit spreading the agenda that has been purported by those same wicked, tyrannical people. Quit purporting that as truth. Quit assuming you understand all the ins and outs of this warfare when it is warfare, and purporting that you could have done it better, that you know the answer, that you wouldn't have to resort to war. Again, if it were in America, I can't imagine anything but hell coming down, seeking out those people and squashing every one of them that would not lay down their arms and lay down that vow to bring terror to every American they could to their last breath. So when you put it that way, is this war reasonable or is it inhumane? Are the innocent lives that are really the crossfire of Hamas's choices and tyranny, are they necessary? I believe with all my heart that they are fighting to preserve every innocent life they can. But the enemy's still there, and they're still torturing, they're still committing atrocities. Some of those captives from 2 years ago are still being held captive today. So wisen up, especially to the church. Wisen up and quit spreading the media that they are the bad guy. They're not. War was brought to them, and now the world gets to eat popcorn and watch and opine and give their opinions about what is right and wrong. I think it's foolishness to weigh in when it's not your fight and when you don't know anything about it. So I'm going to stop there. This was heavier than I well, it's just heavy, but I'll just kind of end it there. Bless you, church. Let the church rise up and be the salt and light we're called to be. And some of that is addressing the things that are out in the open that need to be talked about and addressed and looked full in the face instead of ignoring and playing nice. We got to rise up and be the church, be the salt and light. Bless you, church. I'll talk to you later.